Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 4 stories for you from the Tales from Tech Support subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's get our nerd on. This story comes to us from Audible Nod. Yelling at IT staff does not a business continuity plan make. This is from a few years ago. I was working at a medium-sized company as an IT sysadmin. The company had just recently moved to a new location that was able to more comfortably accommodate its operation. It had an on-site call center, as well as a medium-scale manufacturing and repair center. Since we were new tenants and everyone was now under one roof, many things were still being figured out. One day, we got a notice of a gas leak in the manufacturing area. We didn't have an alarm system for a gas leak, so people were running around telling everyone else that there was a mandatory evacuation of the building. The IT people all had laptops, so we all grabbed them and made our way to our cars. By coincidence, our director of IT and the head of IT support were on a business trip. As I'm walking out the door, the call center director, I'll call him Cal, started yelling at me and the other sysadmin. Hey, what are you guys going to do? Go to our cars? No, you can't. We can't receive calls. You have to do something. I turned to my coworker and we both realized that the call center still used desktop computers and soft phones. They couldn't do their job. Cal was red in the face, trying to slowly let people out the door to the outside. It was then that the fire department arrived, probably to clear out the building officially. So I asked Cal, "What's your plan if there's a fire? Just do that." "What? No, you need to do something." I shrugged. "We can't do anything. The phone system probably doesn't work off of VPN. I was guessing at that. Just follow your plan if there's a fire. You guys never gave us a plan for a fire, Cal responded. Because, of course, it's IT's job to develop a business continuity plan for the entire company. More people were streaming out. It was then I decided to ignore him and go to my car. I tried to call the director of IT in the slim chance the airplane diverted or was delayed. No answer. I looked up in the company's SharePoint site for a business continuity plan or fire plan or something, but only found stuff for IT, including our offsite backup servers and how to run IT operations from VPN. There was nothing about moving our soft phones to or through VPN. Cal knocked on my car window after everyone was out of the building. Well, I explained that there was no business continuity plan in the SharePoint site, and IT didn't have anything in place to shift the soft phones to VPN. Plus, we didn't have enough laptops to support even half the call center. Cal didn't like my answer and walked over to the CEO who was with the fire department. I could see Cal pointing at me and yelling. Clearly, we were losing business, and clearly, it wasn't just IT's fault, it was mine and mine alone. The fire department cleared us to go back in after about 45 minutes. Later that day, I had 2 meetings with Cal and the COO scheduled. Since IT was missing both leadership positions to travel, I was the scapegoat. The first meeting was cancelled, and the second, the CEO stepped in and cancelled it since it was really the job of the director of IT, and a lowly sysadmin shouldn't be in these meetings. Nothing bad happened to me when the IT director returned, and the company hired a consultant to develop an actual business continuity plan for fires, weather, and other events. Turned out, IT shouldn't have a button they could press in the event of a gas leak. For several months, Cal scowled at me after that every time we passed in the hall. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called JustSomeGuy56. It says, "Every place I worked had some sort of business continuity plan. I only saw one that would actually work. They are expensive and require constant updates and drills, and few companies are willing to spend the money. So they cook up some nice PowerPoint slides and maybe pay for a backup site for the servers and call it a day. I do recall one company that was in the North Tower of the World Trade Center They had a complete backup facility with desks, telephones, computers, etc. Unfortunately, it was in the World Trade Center South Tower. Another commenter called Not Your Nanny said, "Where I work, anything that uses electricity and anything that someone can't identify, whether it uses electricity or not, is an IT problem." OP responded to this one and said, "That place was like that. Vending machines, parking lot lights, and LP air hosing was all of IT's problem." Hey, OP, this coffee maker has a digital clock on it, so that's IT's responsibility too, right? I wonder once this place actually has a gas alarm installed, if people are going to have to hit it any time that Cal walks by. I mean, all of that hot air's gotta trigger something, right? This story comes to us from Benjazio XD, when DNS is just a dude. Hey, I've been lurking through this subreddit for more than a decade at this point. I have now become a telecom engineer, and I have some stories to give back to this wonderful place. This is the story of when our name server was just a dude. I had just started working a volunteer position for a local NGO. I was already studying engineering and had been working with these guys for a while. As the resident young guy that works with computers in a place filled with old people, I just slowly drifted into an IT of sorts. After getting Office running on a couple laptops and fixing and documenting their heinous email situation, I got some one-on-one time with our librarian. "Hey OP, can you help me with something here?" There was a reference collection of books for internal use, around 30,000 books in total, managed by this one guy who also cared for the NGO's extensive paper archives, which were around 100 years old. He's a cool guy who actually turned into a great sidekick for many projects I did while working there, and we remained friends even after I left. You see, we've had this ILS for a while, and I've been told it has an open access catalog so our guys can see what we have and come pick it up, but I've never gotten it to work right. Could you take a look at it? An integrated library system, ILS, is a piece of software that tracks pretty much everything inside a modern library. Inventory, loans, labeling, shelving, late fees, you name it. These are very niche software, but also extremely powerful. They are the beating heart of many libraries, big and small. This one was hosted on a local server in the office itself, and a quick browser check to the local IP address of the server revealed that it did, in fact, have an open access catalog. It's supposed to be on our webpage, but I've got no idea how it works, and no one really explained it to me when I got here. Sure enough, there was a link on our webpage that just returned a blank page every time, and not only that, it seemed to be an internal URL on our web server, which didn't really make sense, considering it was on a different machine halfway around the world. Nothing in the world would have prepared me for what I saw when I clicked on Inspect. So, has anyone ever told you anything about this before? The previous girl that had my job told me that the page had to be updated every couple of weeks and left me a couple of links I had to follow, but she never taught me how to do it, and that was like 5 years ago. JC, this hadn't been working in a long time. And this blank page was actually an iframe, which pointed to the front end on our public IP address. This was janky and unnecessary, but what turned it into depravity was one key little detail. We had a dynamic public IP address. This meant that for years, someone had to connect via FTP to the site every couple of weeks, go to this page, and modify the iframe so the IP address matched the current one we had. There were no notifications set up either, which meant someone had to notice and tell the librarian that this was going on in order for this to even work. And when they changed librarians, no one bothered to write this down, and so that site was just permanently broken. Our dynamic DNS solution was just having a dude update a file on a remote server whenever they noticed the gosh darn page was down. This is extremely stupid. How did nobody notice this earlier? You're the first guy here who actually knows enough to care. My heart sank a little. Apparently, this guy had been complaining about this for years because the dev team for that website was long gone. No one had bothered to get someone to look at it. It was an unfortunately common scene in this place, and it was the reason that made me leave it some years later. Right, this is going to take me about an hour to get everything set up, but I'll get it fixed and running before the day is done. My solution was just to get a DDNS provider and hook it up to a subdomain of our main site using a CNAME record and just changing the link to the page to the new address. This was fairly low traffic website, and just have their server directly respond to requests was fine. I used a small script on the local server running every 5 minutes to update the IP address to the DDNS provider, and that was it. It now just worked on its own. You have no idea how much rage you've removed from my system. Let me buy you lunch tomorrow. We got a static IP a few months later, and I made a friend in the process. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Jirbu. It says, "Nice job, but 20 years ago, it was probably acceptable to connect a dusty, unsupported piece of software to the open internet. Now that you'll have a static IP, your next support job will probably be to fix all the damage that bots and script kiddies cause by hammering malicious requests to your fairly low traffic website." OP responded and said, "Oh, absolutely. This was years ago, but we actually overhauled the entire network when we got this static IP. We send our traffic through Cloudflare proxy and then through a hardware firewall on site." This one really made me think there are a lot of older companies out there that are still really small and probably don't have dedicated IT teams. Can you imagine what their networks look like if you really lift up the hood and take a look underneath? Just how many of them are completely unsecured? Back to OP's story though, we know that DNS stands for Domain Name System, but DNS in this one also seems to stand for definitely not sustainable, a perfect summary of the whole setup. Or how about duct tape networking system, because that's a spot-on description of the janky patched together solution. But considering how long it had been since this was updated properly, I think the proper DNS definition in this case was dude not seen. This story comes to us from Final Fantasy VII Rules, dude. I agree. The customer who didn't understand, turning it off and on again. I work in tech support for a fairly large company, and I've had my fair share of bizarre calls, but this one really stuck with me. A customer calls in, and the first thing I notice is that they're clearly frustrated. I ask for details, and they explain that their computer is just frozen and nothing is working. I tell them as calmly as possible, "No worries, let's start by rebooting the computer. Please hold the power button for 10 seconds to turn it off, then turn it back on." There's a pause on the line, then customer says, "I don't know how to do that." I said, "You don't know how to turn off your computer?" Customer says, "No, I don't know where the power button is." I'm trying to stay professional at this point, so I walk them through it. I even ask them if they can find the power button on the actual device. They respond that they don't see one. So I ask, "Can you look on the side or the back of the computer for a button or a logo?" Customer says, "It doesn't have one." At this point, I'm a little confused, but I decide to walk them through the process anyway. I start asking if they see any lights on the device. They tell me no, nothing is lighting up. Then it hits me. I ask, "Are you sure you're working with the computer?" Customer says, "Well, no, I'm looking at my microwave." This person had been trying to reboot a microwave for 30 minutes, thinking it was their computer. After a long, awkward silence, I confirmed that microwaves don't have the same functionality as computers and recommended they try restarting their actual computer instead. They were extremely apologetic, and I just couldn't stop laughing after I hung up. Never a dull moment in tech support, folks. Stay strong out there. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Tiny Nice Wolf. It says, "I confused a microwave with a computer once, but only because some guy from Microsoft called me because Microsoft detected my computer had a virus, and I needed to allow remote access and pay them. For a few minutes, I described my struggles, allowing remote access to my device. I'm clicking the start button, but it's just making a whirring sound, and the round thing is spinning. But eventually the guy caught on, cursed at me, and hung up." Another user down below called Reoccurrent said, "I've had people call in, act like they're in front of their computer, and have you go through troubleshooting steps like rebooting, and when you call them out because they claim they rebooted and everything is up and ready 10 seconds later, they respond with, 'Oh, you guys always say that. I just want to hear something to try when I get home.' Or, why do I need to be at my computer for you to fix this? Some people just plain turn their brain off the minute they call in for support. This is so true, and there are so many people out there that think calling into tech support is going to be the absolute answer. Like, tech support has a button that just automatically un-Fs your stuff. You know, another way to look at this one that I didn't really think about until going through all the comments on it was, just how high was this person? This story comes to us from Oinky Confidence. Monitor eating office cat. Small office customer sold a new bezel-less 24-inch LCD monitor to said customer. Customer takes it on site and hooks it up. All works well. It sits on a counter by a large window. Customer calls me a few days later, says the new monitor is dead. The power light is on, but no signal. I have him try a different cable, different port on the PC, etc., but nothing. So we process a replacement, swap it out, and chalk it up to it being DOA. Customer calls me again a few days later still, says you're not going to believe this, but the second new monitor is doing the same thing as the first. At this point, I'm thinking their office must have a power problem or something that's killing monitors, but I decide I'll take a truck roll and see for myself. I go on site and bring a third new monitor with me just in case. I open the door and see a very pretty cat walking on the floor. I look at the old original monitor, which was replaced by the new 24-inch. It was an old 17-inch LCD from a decade ago and had thick, beefy bezels as monitors from that era did. I see some bite marks at the top corners, but they're just on the bezel, so no actual screen damage. It's beginning to add up. Their office cat had been chewing the corners of the old thick bezeled monitor, which was fine until they got a new monitor that had no bezels at all. And all it took was one bite from the cat to pierce the LCD itself. Twice. Once they were made aware, it was easy to see the teeth marks in the corner of the LCD of the new monitor. Customer ended up getting a used 22-inch monitor with thick bezels. Cat still chews on the corners. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called DickCheney600. It says, and somehow both times it was in the exact right or wrong spot to cause the display to be completely black. Whether the backlight or raster was still present probably wouldn't be all that noticeable to a layman unless they dimmed the room lights. Usually when an LCD is physically damaged, the ones I've seen would have a black mark where it was damaged that can be seen even with the screen off, albeit sometimes having to shine a flashlight at it to see the black mark. And then when you turn it on, there's usually a rainbow pattern on part of it. OP responded and said, I probably have a picture of it somewhere still. I remember the distributor wanted to see pics even if they couldn't warranty or return the chewed screens. I was surprised too that the screens just up and died at a bite crack at the corners of the screen itself, instead of just deadening that particular area. I just recently replaced the monitors on my computer for my editing station, and well, now that we don't have any bezels on these screens, where the heck am I supposed to put all of my sticky notes? If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.